Hey there, truth seekers. I'm Larry Litton, your guide through the maze of modern politics and power dynamics on liberty, leadership, and lies. Each episode will challenge the narratives, expose the lies, and celebrate the leaders who champion true liberty. Get ready to question, learn, and maybe even change your mind. So let's dive into the truth together. Welcome to Season 5, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be back at the microphone after such a long break. The Christmas and New Year's holiday was a great time spent with family and friends. No rest for the weary, though, because I hopped on a plane and headed out to Riverton, Wyoming on the 2nd of January, and then made my way up to Gillette for the greater part of last week. And then I made my way up here to Bowman, North Dakota last Thursday afternoon, and here in a little bit I'll be driving down to Casper, Wyoming, where I'll be releasing the show from. Later this afternoon, I will be making my way back down to Gillette for a few days before wrapping up this trip back where it all started, in Riverton. My bride and I, we successfully undecorated the house, both inside and out, by New Year's Day, except for the 2 Christmas trees in the house. Denise only takes those down on Three Kings Day or Epiphany. Let me tell you though, the weather up here, it's been brutally cold since I arrived. Many days with snow as well. I think it snowed every single day that I've been here. There's only been one day where the temperature has not been sub-freezing since I touched down in Casper on the 2nd. Some days the snow has made the driving a bit sketchy, but not bad enough from keeping me heading out into the field and spending time with the guys. It also seems like my bride and the rest of Sevier County had to deal with some snow as well. While the people up here are used to it, I know it caused a lot of trouble back home. Well, that's enough for the update, so let's get on with the Season 5 opener, folks. The 114th General Assembly of Tennessee will be convening at noon tomorrow in Nashville. And the priority for these folks, at least for our non-conservative Governor Bill Lee and his henchmen of Senator Jack Johnson and Representative William Lambert, they appear to have the school stamp scheme as their priority so that they can rob the people of their liberty. Of course, these three and their big money out of state supporters have been really busy spreading lies about this piece of legislation that has the primary purpose of purchasing a legacy for the governor, using the taxpayers' money to do it as well. So for now, let's get on with this week's show and take a stand in the arena together as we dive into the tyranny that comes about when government institutes education vouchers or school stamps. Welcome to Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, the podcast where we unravel the complex web of politics, power, and deception. Each week, we dive into the stories behind the headlines, exploring how liberty is eroded and the selfishness of our political leaders, as well as the lies that shape our world. Join us as we dissect the truth from fiction by examining the tactics used by the new aristocracy, the political class, at the local, state, and national levels of government as we dare to challenge the status quo. Get ready for thought-provoking discussions, exclusive interviews, and a journey into the heart of what really drives our society. Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, where your understanding of the world begins to change. Tune in every Monday morning and prepare to see beyond the veil. All right, here we go. We're going to begin this segment discussing a bit of the history of school vouchers, or as we have come to call them here, school stamps. Thanks, Kelly. Like food stamps, it is a government entitlement program born on the backs of taxpayers to pay for something that is not a constitutional function of government. We'll discuss shortfalls with previous or current programs in other states and the ways in which school stamp programs erode liberty. The concept of school vouchers has been a contentious issue in education policy for more than half a century now. Supporters of these programs believe it to be a pathway to educational quote unquote freedom. More on that in a bit. Also, that somehow these school stamps provide some sort of increased competition in the marketplace, as well as the vouchers resulting in improved educational outcomes. But if we look carefully at the history of these government schemes, their coercive implementation, As well as the outcome of these school stamps programs, it will expose a narrative far removed from these government promises. After all, somebody please name me a promise the government has made to the people over the past century that has worked to our benefit. More specifically, how it was beneficial to liberty and freedom. So, in this season five opener of the podcast, we will explore how school vouchers, rather than fostering improved educational standards and enhancing liberty, have often led to negative academic outcomes, increased social stratification, and a subtle erosion of the very freedoms they were meant to champion. Keep in mind the title of the legislation Governor Bill Lee and his mafia like lieutenants in the General Assembly, Jack Johnson, William Lambert, keep in mind what they have titled their school stamp scheme, the Education Freedom Act of 2025. First, though, let's get into the genesis of these vouchers, their ideological roots, and instances of early implementation. The modern idea of school vouchers can be traced back to Milton Friedman's 1955 essay, The Role of Government in Education, where he proposed vouchers as a means to introduce market principles into education, thereby increasing parental choice and school efficiency. Friedman argued that by allowing parents to use public funds to send their child to private schools, there would be an incentive for all schools to improve, driven by the competitive pressures of a free market. I know. Milton Friedman was a brilliant dude, and I believe that the architects of these schemes know that many people here on the conservative side of the political spectrum respect and believe everything he had to say. Unlike the people on the left side of the political spectrum, though, we are not lemmings. We can disagree with some of the thought leaders on economics while still championing most of their work. Same thing with politics. You will never see the lemmings that are the commies ever in disagreement, except for some small pockets of it due to this last presidential election, which they lost in a landslide. They are collectivists first. While those on the right can often disagree with some of our political heroes, let's take Ronald Reagan, for instance, one of, if not the greatest conservative presidents in the modern era. Yet even today, we suffer from his two biggest blunders. The Amnesty Act of 1986, which led to modern day California, and his failure to abolish the Federal Department of Education. Anyway, the initial practical application of vouchers in the United States had less noble beginnings. In the 1950s, following the Supreme Court's decision in Brown versus Board of Education, some southern states implemented voucher systems as a mean to circumvent desegregation. For instance, in Virginia's Prince Edward County, public schools were closed to avoid integration, and vouchers were used to fund white students' attendance at private, segregated academies. Their early use of vouchers was not about educational choice or performance, but rather about preserving racial segregation, marking the first significant erosion of liberty under the guise of school choice. How do you think that may run in today's society? Pick any category that is the flavor of the month or the year and decide those will be the only students that quote unquote qualify for one of the 20,000 scholarships being offered by Transpublican Bill Lee. By the way, another lie being touted by the not so illustrious governor and his henchmen is how this will be universal school choice. Just how universal are these vouchers if they will be only offered to just 1.98% of students in the state of Tennessee? Yep, you heard that right. In the first round or year of this garbage legislation, less than 2% of students will be eligible to receive the so called scholarship of roughly $7,000. And it only grows by 5%. 5,000 students added scholarships every year after that. Now, assuming for zero population growth in Tennessee, that would mean it would take nearly 200 years for Bill Lee's Education Freedom Act of 2025 to become truly universal by being offered to every student trapped in his and the rest of government's failing government school system. Brandon Lewis of Tennessee Conservative News gave a great breakdown of some of the costs associated with this government grifting scheme last Friday, and you should check it out on all of their socials. But back to a bit of the history on the school stamps, though. Over the decades, voucher programs evolved, not just in scale, but also in their justification. By the 1990s and early 2000s, the rhetoric had shifted towards improving academic outcomes, particularly for disadvantaged students. Programs like Milwaukee's Parental Choice Program in 1990, the first of its kind in modern times, were launched with the promise of lifting educational quality through competition. And just like every other government program, as Milwaukee's voucher scheme expanded, their performance did not match the promised outcomes. For example, in Milwaukee, despite being one of the most studied vouchered programs, research has shown mixed to negative results. A study by Carnoy et al., conducted in 2007, well, that study indicated that voucher schools did not significantly outperform public schools. And in some metrics, students in voucher schools underperformed compared to their government school counterparts. The promise of competition leading to better government school performance was largely unfulfilled, no surprise, and with no consistent evidence of systemic improvement in the Milwaukee public schools due to these voucher competitions lies. Here in Tennessee, House Speaker Cameron Sexton is touting some other study that does show a slight increase in performance by students using the ESA system currently in place. But let me remind you folks, free market competition does result in better outcomes. Government imposed competition almost always does not. Additionally, private schools and homeschoolers that accept these vouchers are tied to testing and other government school regulations that will then turn them into de facto extensions of the government school systems they will be supposedly competing with. We've discussed in previous episodes the competition aspect of education and how it is hard to compete against something, what is known as quote unquote free education. The free aspect of government education is an illusion because there are always costs associated with anything the government does. The first cost, of course, is monetary because schools are funded through taxes, property taxes being one of them, which means that everybody in the state pays for schools even if they don't have any children in them. But more importantly, and this is what they're trying to get at, is the opportunity cost that isn't realized until much later in the child's life. Something that is quote unquote free is never going to be high quality. What these school stamps will ultimately end up doing, with its testing requirements and other reporting regulations, is the same thing that already happened to government schools. Now, moving on though, more recent voucher expansions in Louisiana and Indiana have provided some of the most compelling data against the government claims about the effectiveness of these vouchers. Studies, including those cited in posts on X and by the Economic Policy Institute, have consistently shown negative impacts on student achievement. In Louisiana, voucher students saw test scores drop dramatically in both math and reading, with effects as large as negative zero point 0.4 standard deviation, which represents a significant academic regression. Another critical issue with voucher programs has been the accountability and transparency of private schools receiving public funds. Unlike public schools, private institutions under voucher schemes often operate with less oversight. Speaking of which, there's very little oversight at the government level of the management of this proposed program here in Tennessee. And what we can learn by past government programs with little to no oversight, well, that often leads to an increase in the size and scope of the program, and that's all funded by the taxpayers. As I mentioned in the season finale, the not so craftily hidden cost of this current overreach scheme in the first year alone is more than $400 million. That will grow considerably. Why do you think there are so many think tanks and out of state organizations dumping huge sums of money into not only getting the right politician elected, but also with the advertising and support of this bill? Someone associated with those think tanks and outside organizations are betting on a windfall of government money, which is our money. We also cannot leave out the history of the voucher scheme's fiscal impacts. Never forget that the government does not spend what it does not first take from us, the taxpayers. Initially, government schools, which serve the majority of students, they will see their budgets squeezed as funds are redirected to private schools. This is particularly harmful in areas where public schools are already underfunded. The fiscal externality of vouchers, as described by the studies from the Economic Policy Institute, often results in a net loss for public education systems, with Cleveland being a notable example where public schools faced significant funding cuts. Something else to consider, and which has been proven time and again with any government program, while vouchers were intended to offer choice, they've often led to increased socioeconomic and racial segregation. Here in the US, states like Indiana have seen vouchers disproportionately benefit higher income white families, further segregating education along economic and racial lines. Now let's get into the freedom or liberty aspect of this attempt by Tennessee Governor Bill Lee to purchase a legacy with the taxpayers' money at the behest of globalist organizations. Consider the artful lie of the bill's title, the Education Freedom Act of 2025. Along with other voucher schemes before it in other states and countries, it is ironic that what was supposed to enhance liberty has, in many ways, undermined it. Consider the words used by the globalist Bill Lee and his cohorts in their attempt to sell this bill to Tennesseans by stating that the government is now going to provide parents a quote unquote choice, freedom of choice. The choice is often illusory for many families due to caps on voucher amounts, which do not cover full tuition at many private schools, or because private schools can selectively admit students, leaving out those with special needs or certain backgrounds. We're going to take a quick break right here and pick up the rest of this on the other side. Stick with me because I'm going to be right back. Okay, folks, we're back. And we're going to continue discussing how Governor Bill Lee and the rest of his cabal are lying about parents not having a choice in how their children are educated. Because we all know every parent already, right now, has the freedom to choose how their children are educated. We've discussed it many times before. What Bill Lee and his communist companions have quite successfully done is transform the word choice to actually mean the word means. And what I mean by this is parents already have a choice, but many of them do not have the means to pay for a private education. The Education Freedom Act of 2025 here in Tennessee will be providing the means, but convincing the people that the government is providing them the choice. The communists are really good at changing the meaning of words, right? We've seen that throughout the last 2 decades quite successfully here. Because after all, and like I've said many, many times in the past, if you control the language, meaning you control the narrative, you can control the outcome. Additionally, while many of these voucher schemes are sold to the public on the idea that it will reduce government control, they've paradoxically increased it in most respects. Private schools are now more intertwined with government funding mechanisms, leading to new forms of regulation and oversight that might not have been there without vouchers, thus challenging the autonomy of these institutions. Same thing goes for the homeschoolers. The history of government school vouchers in the United States illustrates a policy initiative fraught with unintended, or maybe very intended, consequences. Instead of enhancing educational outcomes and individual liberties, vouchers have often led to academic underperformance, increased social division, and a nuanced erosion of freedoms they were meant to expand. The narrative from states like Louisiana, Indiana, and historical precedents like Virginia show that vouchers do not straightforwardly lead to educational or societal benefits. It's just an illusion. As our General Assembly moves forward on consideration of this legislation, it is important that we, the people, the ones that fund the operation of government, it is critical that we learn from these lessons, ensuring any educational policy truly serves the public interest and upholds the values of liberty and accountability. Another little historical and unknown fact about these vouchers is this: the term school choice is a slogan that is defined by UNESCO. Yep, you heard me correctly. UNESCO, a United Nations organization. Anyway, school choice is what Governor Lee is trying to force down the throats of every Tennessean. It is defined by UNESCO as a demand side financing or vouchers, which boils down to it meaning that it is merely an alternative funding measure for government education. One description of school choice that I find completely accurate is this quote, "It is a scam to keep us paying taxes on our property and enticing hapless homeschoolers into a new, shiny, gilded cage of strings attached monies." Unquote. Now, Bill Lee, at the prodding of his globalist puppet masters, has been very clever in his advertising of this program. The clever lies start with the bill's title. The cleverness continues in that this additional government program is being touted as freedom. Well, freedom, ladies and gentlemen, is a lack of government involvement, not more of it. It is time for everybody to do their homework and look into what organizations are pushing this bill, along with the people that lead these organizations. Here are some names I think you need to look up. The first one is Aaron Gulbranson. He's one of the biggest cheerleaders of the establishment Transpublicans here in Tennessee. You will notice some character flaws when you look into him. Now, don't get me wrong, we are all sinners saved by God's grace, but this guy worked hard, continues to work hard, to support the globalists serving in the Tennessee General Assembly. No, I made my mistakes in my youth, and I strive to live like my Lord and Savior calls me to, calling out evil wherever it is. But I don't continue to make these mistakes and try to live a double life, serving two masters, if you know what I mean. Another name to look up is Corey DeAngelis, an instrumental figure behind the voucher push here in Tennessee. Once you investigate his background, let me know if you think he should have anything to do with children, let alone be making decisions on where children should be educated. Then there is the Tennessee State Director for a group called Americans for Prosperity. That group, by the way, has ties to some globalist organizations and people that would quote unquote benefit greatly from the school stamp scheme here in Tennessee. But this director, Lotfi, is also tied to disgraced former Speaker of the House here in Tennessee, Glenn Casada, who resigned amid a corruption scandal and an FBI investigation. Mr. Lofty was put on the state payroll by Glenn Casada with no expectation to even show up for work, defrauding the citizens by receiving a taxpayer-funded salary. Glenn Casada, well, he was Cameron Sexton's predecessor, our current Speaker of the House that defrauded us Tennesseans with false per diem claims or false residency claims. Either one of those claims should disqualify him for public office. But here he is, doing his best to help sell the lies about this voucher scheme. He was caught lying about the first iteration of the scholarship scheme here in Tennessee by falsely claiming how it had led to improved academic scores by students that received their vouchers. And as recently as last week, these globalists aligned with Governor Lee, they have been touting a recent poll suggesting overwhelming support for this wealth redistribution initiative. The poll was conducted with a sample size of only 1,200 respondents. This number of respondents falls significantly short of the proportion necessary to represent the population of Tennessee with any sort of accuracy. There are roughly 7 million residents of Tennessee. To get a much more representative sample would require greater diversity in demographics, geography, and economic backgrounds. This small sample size was used to obtain the desired results. Data that would allow these liberty robbing trans publicans to control the language and control the narrative. Questions in the poll itself were designed to get the needed results. For example, one question asked the respondents if they were in favor of, quote, expanding educational choice to all families across Tennessee, unquote. That is very vague and misleading, and it noticeably left out the word voucher. As we discussed earlier, this bill would not expand this quote unquote choice to all families, but a mere 1.98% of students. Not even close to universal at all, right? And by leaving out the term voucher, which is a very politically charged word, the poll downplayed potential opposition from respondents that would correctly associate vouchers with diverting funds from public schools. This bit of history about education vouchers and the lies being spun by the globalist trans publicans in Tennessee has led me to issue this call to action. I'm putting the contact information for House District 12 Representative Fred Ashley on the screen for my listeners that live in his district to call or email him and ask that he ensure this bill is killed. Also shown is House District 17's Rep. Andrew Farmer. I'm also putting up State Senate District 8 Senator Jesse Seals information and State Senate District 9 Senator Steve Sutherland's information. Those four representatives cover Sevier County. If you do not live in Sevier County, visit the General Assembly's website at Capitol, that's Capitol with an OL, capitol.tn.gov, so you can get your elected representatives' contact information. Do it today. Do it often. For the Sevier County audio-only audience on Spotify or Apple or whatever platform you listen to it on, State Representative Fred Ashley's office phone number is 615-741-5981. Again, that is 615-741-5981. His email address is rep.fred.atchley, A-T-C-H-L-E-Y, at Capitol, again, that's Capitol with an O-L, at capitol.tn.gov. Speaking of Fred, he put out some social media advertisements on Instagram and Facebook asking for his constituents' thoughts about the voucher bill. Judging by the responses, I would say that more than 99% of the people commenting on his ad and post are not in favor of the scheme. It will bear watching how he votes. Watch him quite closely, folks. Mark my words. Continuing with the contact info, though. Representative Andrew Farmer's office phone number is 615-741-4419. Again, that is 615-741-4419. His email address is rep.andrew.farmer@capitol.tn.gov. State Senator Jesse Seals' office number is 615-741-2061. Again, that is 615-741-2061. His office email address is sen.jesse, Jessie, .seal@capitol.tn.gov. I think we can safely assume how he will vote because he was one of those out-of-state money recipients that proved to get him over the finish line and got him elected over the staunch conservative Frank Nicely in last year's primaries. Senator Steve Sutherland's office number is 615-741-3851. Again, that is 615-741-3851. His email address is sen.steve.sutherland@capitol.tn.gov. So email and call your reps, folks. We need to stop this government overreach and redistribution of taxpayer money that will not deliver what the political class is advertising. Thank you all for joining me on this season 5 opening episode. If you are a new listener and enjoyed the content, please share it on your social media accounts and with your phone and email contacts. For the returning listeners, I'm truly humbled by your choice to stick with the show. If you're watching this on Rumble, please give the show a thumbs up. You won't be able to find the show on YouTube for a while because I was put in YouTube jail for 90 days after my last episode that shared actual facts about the jab. Oh well, it is what it is, and I'm thankful for platforms like Rumble that do not suppress free speech. If you're an audio listener, please give the show a review on whatever platform you are listening to it on. And with that, I'm going to take a break right here and come back for the closing in God's Word. So stick with me, and I'll be right back. Well, folks, this season 5 opener kicked off with a call to action for Tennessee residents. It also kicks off 1 week before some possible changes on the national level that are advertised. Now, keep that in mind that it is only advertised. Changes that are advertised to bring a bit of a restoration to constitutional principles of liberty and returning that to the people. I want to repeat the call to action here for my fellow Tennesseans before I share with you some wisdom from God's Word. Contact your state representative and your state senator and urge them to ensure House Bill 1 and Senate Bill 1 does not pass, that it dies either, hopefully, in committee first, but at the very least dies on the floor vote. In this week's episode, we discussed the historical problems with school vouchers, and they, like most government promises, do not perform as advertised. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee's Education Freedom Act of 2025 is a lie through and through and will do nothing to improve government education. It will only enrich those people and organizations that are pushing for the passage of this redistribution of taxpayer money. Now, this week's wisdom from God's Word comes to us from the book of Proverbs, chapter 8, verse 13. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. Pride and arrogance and the way of evil and perverted speech I hate. Governor Lee, along with his allies in the globalist movement here in the United States and abroad, as well as his mafia-like lieutenants in the Tennessee General Assembly, speak with pride and arrogance when they tell the citizens of this great state that they do not have the freedom to choose how their children are educated and that they need to purchase that freedom from government schools with redistributed funds from every taxpayer in Tennessee. They are pushing misleading polls in their mostly successful attempts to control the language and narrative around these school stamps. The time is now, more than ever, for the citizens of this great state and this great nation to regain control of the institution meant to secure the people's liberty. We need to let these elected so-called leaders know that we will not fall for their lies and their cleverly named legislation that only serves the purpose of making themselves and their globalist allies rich, both with money and power. So call your rep, call your senator, call them and email them every day until this atrocity of liberty robbing and wealth redistributing bill is killed. Email them daily and demand that House Bill 1 and Senate Bill 1 be thrown on the ash heap of history. Until next week, ladies and gentlemen, let's all take a stand in the arena together. Reveille, it's time to wake up.